It's a heart-wrenching decision many of us must face one day, trusting someone to care for our aging loved ones.
It tears you up. It's hard to watch that and know that, there's nothing you can do.
A woman's stay in an Austin assisted living facility ended in allegations of sexual abuse, not reported to police.
They broke the law. I think people should be concerned about this.
The legal protection coming after a KXAN investigation points out the problem.
Once it came to our attention, once your investigation brought it to our attention, we took action.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for a special investigative edition of State of Texas In Depth. I'm Josh Hinkle. What we're reporting today is something very important to you and your family. During the course of our year-and-a-half-long investigation, the state agency watching over places like nursing homes and retirement communities admitted to KXAN it made a mistake, even broke the law. It all started after investigator Brian Collister revealed sexual abuse allegations inside an Austin assisted living center named Longhorn Village.
She's very warm, very much a people person.
Alzheimer's disease and dementia took their toll on this Austin woman's mother. She asked we not reveal her face or name.
It tears you up. It's hard to watch that and know that, there's nothing you can do.
It got so bad in 2011, a doctor and judge ruled her mother incapacitated, unable to make decisions for herself, and appointed a legal guardian. Created by the Texas Exes, Longhorn Village seemed the perfect place for her mom, now in her 70s, to get the assisted care she requires. But a few months after entering Longhorn Village, she noticed a change in her mother.
She became more and more distraught. She talked about wanting to move. She became more and more withdrawn and upset.
The woman's legal guardian and family claim in this lawsuit she was sexually assaulted in 2012 by a male resident, described as a sexual predator, not just once, but twice, and that the male resident's sexual activities were known to the administration, but nothing was done to protect his victims.
You believe your mother was sexually assaulted in that nursing home?
I do. I do believe that she was sexually assaulted.
She's allowing us to show you her mother's face because she wants you to see this, what the family describes as a dramatic decline in the months after the alleged sexual assaults.
I'm just heartbroken. She really suffered a lot.
In response to the lawsuit, Longhorn Village denies any wrongdoing. Michael Little was Longhorn Village's Director of Healthcare Services at the time of the incidents.
Was the obligation of Longhorn Village to its assisted living residents?
Objection form.
To ensure the prevention of abuse and neglect.
In this videotaped deposition, Little denies knowing she had a legal guardian, even though Longhorn Village's current director admitted in a later court hearing a copy of the court order was in her medical file.
Didn't you think when there was an allegation of sexual assault that the medical file should have been reviewed for the alleged victim of that assault?
Based on the information we had, we didn't look at it as sexual assault.
Okay, so you didn't review the medical file after the allegations of sexual assault came up?
No.
He also admits they did nothing to stop the male resident, who we're not naming since he has not been charged with a crime. Dr. Carmel Dyer with the Texas Elder Abuse and Mistreatment Institute says caretakers should know when there's a guardianship order, that person cannot make their own decisions.
If a patient has been ruled incapacitated, they cannot participate in consensual sex, period.
And why is that?
It's because they don't have the ability to make an informed choice.
This lawsuit also claims that Longhorn Village did not report the alleged sexual assaults to state investigators as required by law. They didn't even tell the family. It was a nurse at Longhorn Village who eventually reported the case on her own to investigators here at the Texas Department of Aging and Disability Services.
We all knew that her mental capacity was not one that could consent. We all knew that.
Longhorn Village fired that nurse, Kathy Yessian, seen here in a video deposition. She and another employee who were fired sued for retaliation. Longhorn Village agreed to settle both of those cases, but admitted no wrongdoing. Longhorn Village's executive director declined an interview about the sexual allegation, but said in an email the state found the complaint was unsubstantiated and no deficiencies were cited. Based on this thorough independent investigation by the state regulator, Longhorn Village believes the pending lawsuit is entirely without merit. But KXAN has uncovered the state's investigation was far from thorough. A spokesperson for the Department of Aging and Disability Services admitted that in an interview.
It was a failure. It was something that needed to be done, that wasn't done.
The state's investigator said in a 2012 court hearing he didn't even see the guardianship order, and it wouldn't have mattered to him anyway. He determined what happened was consensual sex, and the complaint unsubstantiated.
In this case, your investigator reviewed the medical file, but was not aware that there was a guardianship order. Why not?
Correct. And we don't know why not. We're reviewing the case now to determine what, if anything, could have been done differently.
And KXAN also discovered the Department of Aging and Disability Services did not follow the law. It's required to report all allegations of abuse and neglect to law enforcement.
Initially, you told us that this agency reported this case to law enforcement, but we found that was not the case. Why didn't it get reported to law enforcement?
That's a question we're trying to answer at this time. It was not reported as it should have been.
The fact no one told them and nothing was done leaves the family feeling like the system failed them.
In this case, the guardian wasn't notified and the family wasn't notified, but they should have been notified.
Absolutely.
Frustrated and disappointed. It's just hard to imagine that there'd be that kind of callous approach to someone's care and their responsibility.
When we first revealed these allegations a year ago, the state had investigated a total of 3 abuse and neglect complaints at Longhorn Village. Investigators found all 3 unsubstantiated, not enough evidence to prove anything happened. We checked to see how many of these kind of complaints the state had investigated over the past decade. About 17,000, almost 90% ruled unsubstantiated. Because of our investigation, the Health and Human Services Commission launched its own investigation to find out what went wrong. It oversees the Department of Aging and Disability Services, or DADS, which oversees care facilities. As a direct result of our report, the agency reviewed the past 2 years of abuse and neglect complaints DADS has investigated to make sure inspectors followed the law by reporting all allegations to law enforcement. That included the Longhorn Village case, which is now in the hands of the Travis County District Attorney. As for the elderly male resident, at the time of this investigation, 2 years after the allegation, he was still living at Longhorn Village. We called, and he denied an assault ever happened. But the internal review into DADS also revealed the agency didn't follow the law in hundreds of other cases. The fallout from our report when this special investigative edition of State of Texas In Depth returns.
You believe your mother was sexually assaulted in that nursing home?
I do. I do believe that she was sexually assaulted.
A family's allegation launching a 1.5-year-long KXAN investigation, leading to a change in law and forcing a state agency to re-examine hundreds of its own cases. Welcome back to this special investigative edition of State of Texas In Depth. Someone sexually assaulted an elderly mother at an Austin assisted living facility, Longhorn Village. That allegation led us to uncover more problems in the system that's supposed to protect your elderly loved ones. The state agency responsible for inspecting that claim broke the law by not contacting law enforcement. And KXAN investigator Brian Collister discovered that was far from the only time it made that mistake.
Thousands of senior citizens live in nursing and assisted living homes across Texas. When a report of alleged abuse, neglect, or exploitation comes into the Department of Aging and Disability Services, or DADS, the law says the agency must notify law enforcement within 24 hours so it can conduct a criminal investigation.
They broke the law. I think people should be concerned about this.
The American Association of Retired Persons says it's concerned DADS never reported more than 1,500 of these cases. That's 78% of all cases in just the last 2 years.
It's appalling, quite frankly. I mean, folks are depending on the state agency that licenses and regulates these facilities to follow the laws and the regulations, and the fact that the agency isn't following a law that's designed to protect these folks is appalling.
It's unacceptable, and I want to find out why. Why is it happening?
State Senator Jane Nelson helped pass legislation to make the reporting a requirement. And she says she didn't know the state wasn't following the law.
Why not? Why didn't they do their job? I mean, I can pass legislation, but I expect that our state agencies will certainly abide by the laws that we pass.
To find out why not, we went straight to the top, to the man in charge at DADS.
Your agency is required by law to report allegations of abuse, neglect, and exploitation to law enforcement within 24 hours. But in more than 1,500 cases, you didn't do that. Why not?
It appears that we did not do a good enough job of communicating that obligation out to our staff. Once it came to our attention, once your investigation brought it to our attention, we took action.
By notifying law enforcement agencies across the state of cases they failed to report, even those where their own investigators substantiated claims of abuse, according to these DADS reports, including in Waxahachie, where a resident was found deceased outside with severe burns on his arms. In Fort Worth, staff failed to contact emergency services in a timely manner when resident complained of having a heart attack. The resident died. And in Bedford, due to facility neglect, the resident sustained a burn with blister the size of a cantaloupe. Dad says law enforcement was eventually notified by facility staff or family members in many cases, although it cannot say exactly how many. Even so, state investigators are still required to report every allegation they receive within 24 hours.
This was an important procedural requirement, and it did take place in many cases, but in many cases it did not.
It didn't take place in 78% of the cases.
There's no question that this was systemically an area where we fell down on.
And failing the same senior citizens they're supposed to be protecting.
We need to know numbers. We need to know every case should be reported, so we know, what's happening, what can we do to do things differently. Are we doing our job of making sure that these vulnerable individuals are being protected, both in our nursing homes and assisted living?
During this investigation, Brian learned this former nurse was the one who first told the state about the allegation. She and other employees say they were fired in retaliation for reporting it. They sued the assisted living facility just as the alleged victim's family did. Both settled out of court. Longhorn Village also took us to court in an attempt to obtain our research for this story, but the court denied its request. Coming up, another state lawmaker reacting to our report and filing legislation to better protect your loved ones when this special investigative edition of State of Texas In Depth returns. Welcome back to this special investigative edition of State of Texas In Depth. Governor Greg Abbott has announced the appointments of new leaders of the state's largest agency, the Health and Human Services Commission. Chris Traylor will serve as Executive Commissioner, and Charles Smith will serve as Deputy Executive Commissioner. The move comes after exposure of mismanagement, concerns over contracts, child abuse investigations, and also after a problem pointed out by KXAN. You see, that agency oversees the Department of Aging and Disability Services, or DADS. We first uncovered how DADS did not do its job to protect elderly patients at assisted living facilities. One area lawmaker, Representative Elliot Neistat, saw our investigation and promised our Brian Collister he would help. Brian joins us from the Capitol, where we found out that lawmaker has kept his word. Brian?
Yes, Neistat authored legislation that the governor just signed into law, and it all stems from the very investigation we've been telling you about. Beginning with allegations that a male resident of an Austin assisted living facility sexually assaulted a woman there who had dementia and a court-ordered guardianship in place. The state investigator concluded the sex was consensual, but didn't take note of that guardianship document, which stated the woman couldn't make decisions on her own. But this new law requires facilities to keep those orders on file and also requires state inspectors to check for that document before completing their report. The state investigator who looked into these allegations later died, so the state agency had no ability to go back and find out why he didn't look at this woman's guardianship orders. Now, this new law is aimed at making sure this never happens again and that your loved ones are protected. Josh?
Thank you, Brian. Of course, with any new law, there must be oversight, which is what I discussed with Neistat shortly after the legislature passed its bill. How can families learn to trust the state when it's made mistakes like this?
Well, mistakes are made and then they're corrected either by the agency or through rulemaking or by the legislature. During the interim, we look at how this particular bill is being implemented. I'm on the Human Services Committee. I'm on the Public Health Committee. But it's not just me. There are interim charges committees where they may look at something like this. But I promise you that the agency will be following up on this and making sure that the new law is complied with.
And that's something your office is going to make sure happens?
Absolutely. And the new commissioner of the Health and Human Services Commission is a friend. His name is Chris Traylor, and before he assumed this new job, he was the commissioner for the Department of Aging and Disability Services. I guarantee you that he will be looking closely at this in terms of making sure that the law is implemented and enforced.
This new law to better protect families and your loved ones goes into effect September 1st of this year. You can check out our full report in the politics and investigative sections of KXAN.com. There you can check out our special web feature, A Failure to Protect. We have a searchable database of assisted living facilities across the state, their complaints, and inspection results. Remember, this was all sparked by a whistleblower, someone who saw a problem happening where she worked and wanted to help. If you have something you need KXAN to investigate, email us at reportit@kxan.com. From all of us at KXAN's political and investigative teams, thank you for watching State of Texas.